Well, hello, everyone. This is Wilson Cole. I'm president of Adams, Evans, and Ross, and I am joined on this call, as always, with our general counsel and one of my daughters, Samantha Cole. How are you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good. Jealous you're at the beach, but all in all, not
I am traveling this week, so I guess I'm president at large these days, but I'll be back into Atlanta on Wednesday. At the time of this particular filming, it is kind of high holidays for our family. I am from the northern Gulf Coast, and Mardi Gras is a big deal down here. So Mardi Gras season just started, and it kind of goes into full swing at the end of next week. And that is when Samantha and all three of her other sisters and their husbands, daughters, and sons and everybody comes in for Mardi Gras weekend and down here on the coast and all that good stuff. So it's kind of high season, high holidays for the Cole family. So anyway, we'll get pictures of our in-house attorney at Mardi Gras next week.
Yeah, I'm thinking you and I will have the Mardi Gras week in session together meeting here.
That is a good point. In fact, we will do Mardi Gras. We can't do it. We always do Monday morning meetings because Tuesday is Fat Tuesday, which is a week from tomorrow. Is no,
2 weeks from tomorrow.
2 weeks from tomorrow is when the Fat Tuesday is. So anyway. What we're going to talk about today is when you're signing your clients' contracts. And, you know, there's benefits and there's drawbacks, but if you're dealing with a company that is large enough to where they've had their own contracts drawn, just understand they're having you sign their contracts, in my opinion, so they kind of have the upper hand if things go south. It doesn't mean that they're trying to pull anything over on you. It doesn't mean that they're bad folks. It just means that they have got you to sign their contract because probably something in their company history happened where they said, oh, hell no, we're not doing that again. Everybody has to sign our contracts. We're going to kind of break this session into two segments. One is on the staffing or the contract side, which I probably have had a little bit more experience in dealing with. And then on the recruiting side, Samantha, it just seems like in the last 3 or 4 months, has had clients that have signed some of the most god-awful contracts that if they had taken a half a minute to read, they would have known that they were working for free. And you know, because they have, in some of those, they've actually morphed into, you know, just a contract that covers their interest to a contract that pretty much says that they don't have to pay. The biggest issue on that side is if you do the contract or if you're doing master service agreements where you're providing staffing in a location and they say, hey, you have to work with our master service agreements and and you have to go through, you know, this company that we've hired to handle all of our staffing. Two of the biggest gotchas that create a nightmare from a collection standpoint and then at a later date a problem for our forwarding attorneys or Samantha is they always have wording that says if you do not present them an invoice within typically 60 days, sometimes it can say 90 days, it's no longer considered a valid invoice. Now, the logic to that is, you know, as these vendor management agreements are going through, you know, if I'm a vendor management, you know, by theory, you supply the staffing, you send me the invoices, I send over our invoice with our markup to the company, I get paid, I pay you, and everything's good. The last thing that I would want is in 6 to 8 months, all of a sudden, every staffing vendor say, oh yeah, by the way, Wilson, you know, back 8 months ago, I just found an invoice I forgot to send to you. And so now all of a sudden I'm supposed to go back to the end client and explain why, you know, why we didn't have it. That's what it was set up to protect against. Here are the unintended or the intended consequences of that. Is if it says that if you don't supply an invoice within 60 or 90 days, the issue is, let's say I'm a staffing vendor. Samantha sends me her invoice. I don't see it. It falls off on my desk, or I'm just kind of wanting to increase our profits a little bit. I ignore that first invoice. Well, things go on, and then let's say it's 45 or 60 days later, Samantha looks at her invoices and her aging and says, hey, I got paid on this invoice and that invoice, but I didn't get paid on that invoice. If it was a 60-day notification, all I would have to tell Samantha is, Sam, it looks like it could be a valid invoice, but it's 64 days past due now, and I don't show a record of ever receiving it. So unless she sent it to me certified, there's no way for her to be able to document that I actually received that invoice. Therefore, under the terms of that agreement, I wouldn't have to pay it. Now, there's attorney arguments and legal arguments on why it would still be owed, but just understand, strike number one is against you on that. Another thing that they put in there is if they do not get paid, they do not have to pay you, which there again, let's say I'm a vendor manager and Sam's supplying staffing and they have quality issues and they say, hey, we're not going to pay this invoice. They were absolute morons. We're not going to pay it. Okay. That's probably the thing they were trying to protect against. But the reality of it is what's happened is, let's say I'm dealing with mega corporation. I'm a vendor, and Samantha's one of 100 people that are supplying staffing throughout the world. Let's assume that I get an HR manager that goes, hey, look, we've got problems down there in Atlanta. That plant, we're not getting timely things. I can't trust anything. I need you to work with me because you've got the other 100 offices, but I don't want to pay the last 30 days of invoices because I don't trust them, or we're needing to do whatever. I could technically tell that company, look, I tell you what, I'll go ahead and waive, the cost of those invoices. Just go ahead and we'll just start over fresh. Everybody drops the ball. Well, it sounds great that I'm being that kind, but all I've done is I've taken Sam's, 98% of her money and I've just thrown it to the wind, and I've given up 2% of that invoice that was maybe my margin or kickback. So they can use your staffing to help solidify their position with that staffing firm by just telling them, hey, don't pay me. So the two things on those vendor management agreements and master staffing agreements is just be very, very careful if there is a 60 to 90 day clause. Also, if we don't get paid, we don't owe you. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying be very careful. Also, be very careful over jurisdiction. And we've talked in our last episodes, and if you go back, it's too much of a subject to get into, but if it covers arbitration from a collection standpoint, it creates a real pain in the butt. Now, Samantha, I know you've had some specific, oh my God, stuff that's come out of left field that our clients had no idea what they were signing or didn't think about it. Why don't you share with our group here what you've run into?
What I've been noticing too is they're starting to do vendor agreements. And it's not just a vendor agreement for recruiters. It is anybody that they deal with. So it's now this 10, 12, 20-page document that covers everything from recruiting to the catering they bring in. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, one of the jokes that we always joked about in law schools, the biggest lie in contracts is clicking, I've read terms and conditions for, iTunes or Netflix or any of those things, because the contracts are long, nobody's going to read them, things like that. And I'm worried that these larger companies are transitioning that into how they're just dealing with their vendors. Because we're starting to see these long contracts that, I look at going, I don't know if the, client or our client read it, or, they may have read the first 3 things they thought was the only thing regarding recruiting, and then there's something hidden in the back.
Okay.
The big things that I'm seeing are the we always recommend, and granted, if you don't get the contract signed, this creates a whole nother slew of issues that we can cover at a later date. But we always recommend having from last presentation, 12 months, whatever your possessory period is, from last discussion, presentation, any of those things.
Because that resets the possessory period to where if you present somebody in July, y'all have a discussion in January, then it resets it for an additional 12 months. Is that, just to be clear, that's why you want that? Okay.
Exactly. But if you don't get the contract signed, it can create some legal ramifications if it goes to court. So just always get your contract signed. That's a song and dance that I will do at a later date. However, I'm seeing so many that are coming in 12 months from receipt of resume, period. Not even discussion, interview set up. Let's say you send 10 candidates over. That is the day that they can use.
Yeah. And I can tell everybody, if you have a client that you think, man, I think they're waiting until the 13th month to hire them, I can tell you they're waiting until the 13th month to hire them. We've seen a lot of that here lately.
Then I've also seen where we get to decide if it's a qualified resume. If it's not a qualified resume, then a fee is not owed.
What does qualified resume mean, though? Because that's
exactly
open.
It's open to interpretation. And I've seen where, candidates presented, they send back candidates not qualified. 8 months later, they hire the candidate. Well, he wasn't qualified at the time.
Yeah. He went and got, and there again, it's certainly a subject for another one, but we had one very similar to that where he went and got new training. So their argument was he was a different person, as far as they were concerned, which is, genetically he was the same guy, but he was a different person. So they deemed qualified.
Yes. So anything, when I look at contracts and when we're doing releases or things like that, I hate anything where you can do a ton of gray. I know life is in the gray zone, but it needs to be black and white. And anything that is so subjective as to, the candidate's qualified, or, I love if we've ever spoken to the candidate or they're in our ATS, we don't have to notify you. And so, I've seen where, and we can still do procuring cause and there are other options, but I've seen where clients have worked all the way through the recruiting process, gotten the client onboarded, but they were already in the system. So under our contract, it's not owed.
So they'd even set up the interview and the hiring and everything. And then they say, oh yeah, by the way, we had them, so it's not owed. And I agree with you that's, and if somebody does that to you, they're being bad. It's no longer a dispute, in my opinion. They're just trying to openly steal your candidate. But I do agree with you. You need to be careful of what you sign, and if they're signing your agreement, hopefully you've taken the pointers from Samantha. Maybe you've even downloaded her free best practices, safeguards, and agreements that, from a collection standpoint that she likes. But what's the best advice? If I'm a recruiter, and I know a lot about recruiting, but I'm not a legal scholar, and all of a sudden I've been given this 5-page to 50-page contract. What do I do to protect myself?
Know that, one, you can always go back and say, hey, can we address this, this, and this? They've probably got if they've got a 50-page, vendor agreement, they've got an attorney that can help edit it.
Okay.
So that's one, is you can go back and say, hey, looks great, looking so forward to working with you, but I've got some concerns about here.
Okay.
And, if they don't want to push for, from date of last presentation, that's fine. See if they'll get, they want to do from receipt of the resume. That's fine. See if they'll give you an 18-month possessory period.
Okay. Well, and actually one thing that we're seeing on some of these agreements is they've actually now dropped down to 6 months. And I saw one that they were trying to push 90 days, which to me is insane. The hiring process typically is over 90 days, but that they're trying to push back on that, shorten up that possessory period.
And, you know, I know everybody's trying to make a deal and things like that, but also know if they're not willing to work with you on making sure both sides are protected, start wondering if it's really a client you want.
Okay.
Because the ones that I've seen where it's these contracts that are, you know, 30 pages and predatory as all get out, they never intended to pay.
And that's a key thing. If you have a mid to small size company, in my opinion, that sends you a 30-page contract, understand that you're probably dealing with somebody that could potentially be a problem. If it's a Fortune 500 or 100 company, in my opinion, it's just where the attorneys in the legal department needed work, and so they kind of went rogue. And one thing I always pick with Sam whenever we're doing a deal is, get it done, get everybody's interest protected, but don't attorney it up to where we don't send over this novel. So I kind of bigger companies, I give almost, I wouldn't say a free pass, because it can still come back and bite you in the butt. But the intention isn't, the original intention wasn't to screw you out of a fee. In my opinion, if it's a 100 less and they're sending you a 30-page contract, they are trying to bypass your fee. Just gut react.
And in the bigger companies that have a 20-page vendor agreement, those aren't the ones that stop me in my tracks when I read them.
Okay.
They're long, they're tedious, they might have an arbitration clause or something like that, but they aren't predatory.
Okay. What are keywords? Because no one, if they're a recruiter, the client's a recruiter, the client's a staffing firm, they're not going to understand half of the language that's in there, because it's designed, in my opinion, that way, where you guys have a trade. But what's some of the phrasing that if they see a word or if they see a phrasing, they need to look at and go, oh, let's call my local attorney or something before I sign this to get it reviewed?
I think anytime you're seeing a subjective word in regards to the candidate, qualified candidate, recommended education, because you'll have ones where they recommend that the education be, they have this type of degree. Well, there may be a degree that's really similar, and then they're getting out of the fee because they had, whatever school they went to, it was a bachelor's of art instead of a bachelor's of science, but it's the same degree.
And the thing that I think is key, because what I see is, the job order will cover a lot of that, which, if they say, hey, we want somebody with a master's, that's job order, that's kind of helping you drill down. But if it is in the contract, then I think that's what Samantha is saying, is that they're mentioning something in there, or that at their sole discretion, because I have seen one where there was a contract that says, if there's a dispute, the sole discretion of XYZ debtor company applies, which means they get to say, hey, we dispute it, therefore it's at our sole discretion that we pay you or not.
And I've also seen where if the candidate is presented but not accepted, a fee is not owed even if the candidate is hired.
So what you're saying there is, if I'm a recruiter, I send over somebody and say, no, we're gonna reject it, and then 6 months later, 4 months later, they reconsider. It's still, they're going to claim that it's not owed because it wasn't accepted.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So I'm seeing a lot of these where it's, accepted, qualified, all of these actions or subjective feelings of the hiring company can get them out of having to pay the recruiter's fee. So anything subjective is what I'm looking at that you need to kind of peek up, and also if they're saying, well, we already knew the candidate, but they don't break down how they knew the candidate.
Exactly. If they are currently being interviewed for the process, contacted in the last 2 weeks for the process, because especially in a niche industry, it's not uncommon for everybody to know everybody. It's more common, than not. In fact, they typically like to use a recruiter to where they can claim that they're not out pillaging other folks' candidates. So no, I agree with you 100% of that.
So those are kind of the big things, or the, subjective terms. If they're, no matter what, if we knew them, a fee's not owed, and, timelines and things like that can be in the contract, or when I would perk up a little bit and recommend they, have an attorney look over it.
Okay. Well, what I do recommend, and you can certainly email Samantha at aercollections.com, or you can email my assistant Janine at aercollections.com, and just put in the subject of Resource Vault. And if you subscribe to our channel, like the channel, we'll send that Resource Vault to you absolutely free, which is about $995 value. If you like what you heard on this video, or if you have a question, ask away. If you don't like what you heard on the video, go ahead and ask. Or if you've got a scenario that you'd like to share with the group, then certainly comment. But everybody go ahead and subscribe. The channel is free. It's the least intrusive way that we found that we can share our content in very short 15-minute little podcasts that covers real problems that we're running into today. Well, Sam, I think that will wrap it up. I think I'll be back into Atlanta, and in a couple of episodes, everybody will see us the day before Mardi Gras, which should be fun. It's kind of, my wife used to tell me years ago that, she married into circus people, that most people get together for Christmas and Thanksgiving. Our family got together for Mardi Gras. And I kind of chuckled to myself that she is now the ringmaster of this circus, and it's bringing all the kids down for Mardi Gras down here. So we did teach your mom a new trick.
Sounds good. Have a good rest of your day down there, Dad.
Thank you. Bye-bye.